Hello, good morning. Welcome all. I'm Rania Francoeur, and today's session, the topic of the hour is CEO or senior leaders role modeling, and specifically in terms of how they show up at their leadership retreat or their corporate offsite. And looking at the impact of their choices, whether they're conscious of them or not, on the team, on the retreat itself, and then on that post-retreat, coming out of the retreat. So the format of these sessions is usually we start off with some opening ideas from Randall Craig, CEO of the Brain Trust, and then we flip into questions from you, from me. And as usual, Randall has no idea what topics are going to come his way, and we don't know what he's going to say either. That's part of the fun. So I'll share a little bit about Randall for those who don't yet know Randall. He's founded several successful startups. He's held a long time position at a Big Four consulting firm. He was a senior executive at an American public company, the author of 8 books in the Speaker Hall of Fame, a master facilitator. He's helped over 100 organizations scale, and he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, helping organizations grow through leadership retreats, executive coaching, board development, and helping facilitate conversations. So Randall, where do you want to start?
Well, when we start at the top, I think the question of, what's the role of the CEO, executive director, managing partner, whatever the title is, at the retreat is also a question of, well, what's the purpose of the retreat in the first place? Is the purpose of the retreat to bubble up ideas from everybody and just to collapse, essentially a lot of brainstorming? Is the purpose of the retreat one of co-creating a shared outcome? So, for example, you're putting together a strategic plan, or you're addressing something like a merger or a potential something or other, and you're co-creating that together. Or is it to broadcast to make sure a new CEO, new leader comes in and they want to broadcast their view to everybody? And I'm going to share that if it's the first, the retreat is probably not the way to do it, because it's a very expensive time to have everybody together for a day, 2 days, 3 days, and to sort of being in tell mode means that you don't, as a CEO, and I'll use that term to mean anybody who's in that most senior role, you don't take advantage of everyone in the room. I think if you're able to take advantage of the brains in the room, not only will you have much better ideas, okay, but you'll also have better alignment and better buy-in when it comes to the actual implementation, and also along the way, better relationships with everybody and between everybody. So if it's to co-create a shared outcome, if it's to bubble up an idea, if it's just plain generic, let's do teamwork and let's build that stronger relationship, then it becomes easier to say, okay, so now what is the role of the most senior leader on the retreat? And I'll boil it down to this: keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. And the reason why is that as soon as you open your mouth, there's almost this reality distortion field where everyone sort of comes and sort of wants to support the idea that clearly you have and is the right idea. But it's very hard. I've certainly been in the CEO role for most of my career in many different organizations of different sizes, and I've certainly advised quite a few in the past. I think it's the question of, as soon as you open your mouth and you say this is what is, it becomes everyone's job, almost because they're used to supporting you as a leader, to say, okay, how can we do this? Or yes, or maybe we could just pivot it a little bit, but no new ideas actually happen. So if you're able to say, okay, my role is not to sort of be that magnetic center of gravity, if you will, but my role in the retreat is actually to, well, I guess several things. Number one is to set that overall direction, to make that connection, for example, between what that overall strategy is, what that goal is, and the purpose of why everyone is actually there today. If people understand that's the role, then they can say, and that's the purpose, they can say, yes, this is how I fit into it. Number two is to say, well, yes, I'll have a lot to say. I could say it at the very end if I need to, right? If I need to give a business update, or to recognize some new faces, or to share and celebrate some of the shared wins, etc., and essentially say, here's this big challenge, and everybody here in this room doing what you do every day is the reason, and the arms and legs and the brain power to figure out how to address that challenge. That's what we're here for. But setting that direction is very different than you actually saying, this is what I think about all the various points that come up. If you end up saying all those things, it does not leave room for other people to come up with other ideas. If we want to have a powerful challenger culture where people feel completely safe in saying, this is what I think, we need to leave room for that, right? And so, buttoning up, okay, is one of the ways to actually make that happen. I think by doing that, you also get a real insight into one other thing that normally you wouldn't do. You get a chance to observe other people actually talking. You could observe who's maybe on the ascendant, who's got that more potential that you might not have had an opportunity to think of them that way in the past. So by observing, it's exceptionally powerful. Um, there's some more roles for you at the retreat, but listen, finding time for your team, your direct reports, maybe if you've got the next level down as well, there to spend that time to open the doors for them to actually do the bulk of the co-creation, then it becomes an awful lot easier for them to buy into it when it comes to the actual execution.
What else? Uh,
What else? Oh man, I guess one of the things that is a terrible difficulty in the eyes of a CEO, especially the most competent ones that can do anything because maybe that's how they got to that most senior role, is to say, well, okay, so if I'm not participating actively, maybe my role should be the facilitator. And let me share, it's very difficult to be a facilitator of a retreat with all these smart people. Okay, if you are the CEO being the retreat facilitator, that means that people may say things to please you or to follow a particular lead that they think that you might have, right? Or if you, for example, will pull from different people, different things. Gee, is my boss asking me that in the role of facilitator? Is the boss asking me that because he's my boss and or she's my boss and she really wants to know these things? It puts up a lot of barriers to that free-flowing information. By the way, one of the things that some retreat facilitator or some CEOs will do is say, well, I've got an exceptionally competent um, chief people officer, chief HR officer, and they actually are really, really good facilitators. So well, yeah, Randall's right. I should not participate. I will just observe, right? But we'll get that person to facilitate. When that happens, unfortunately, it becomes very difficult too, because you take a key part of any kind of implementation, any kind of ideas out of the role of participant, which means you're sharing your ideas, and you're putting them into the role of facilitator, which means they now have to pull everyone else's ideas almost equally, but perhaps not their own, right? It means also that you're dealing with a political dimension of one of your C-level people doing the retreat facilitation. Other people might not feel so comfortable or wondering if what they're saying is being twisted or just pivoted just on a little bit of an angle. So the idea of saying, okay, keep your mouth buttoned. And by the way, there are times we could talk about when the CEO actually does have something to say and should say, right? But for the most part, that's it. Um, listen, reinforce at the end of the day. A great way for a CEO to do this, by the way, is to say, maybe as part of the wrap up of day one, for example, today my greatest insights are such and such. I didn't know that. I wanted to thank so and so for bringing that up. Or this is a great outcome. Here's the biggest thing that I picked out, and make it so that you're not ignoring everybody and you're not touching on everyone's points, but the idea that maybe there wasn't something, maybe there's a mic drop moment at some point during the day where you can say, this is something I learned. Thank you all very much for contributing. I hadn't thought of that one, right? So there's things that you can do. And obviously you can observe the behavior. You're always evaluating your direct reports and the level below to say, is everyone in the right seat? How are they interacting, etc. And this is a great way for you to actually observe that interaction, right? And when you're observing that interaction, yeah, you can make notes, right? You could have a bit of a to-do list for follow-ups with the people, right? And so on.
Great start, Randall. I have my questions as usual that I brainstormed. For me, this idea of talking about role modeling and then seeking our own role models is a bit there's a little bit of irony here because we're talking about in a specific situation, which usually happens behind closed doors. The leadership retreat's happening behind closed doors. So how does anybody learn from other the example of others other than themselves being a participant and watching maybe their leader. But in terms of really knowing best practices or how things impact the room, like you're very limited. You're experimenting for yourself. So I guess my question is, how as a leader would you know that you hit the mark, that you did a good job? Like what metrics do you have to know that you succeeded?
Oh boy, there's actually a lot underneath that question, Rania. So with respect to that, I would answer it two ways. Number one is using the leadership retreat itself as a mechanism to build that modeling in means that perhaps if you've always done the leadership retreat as being only the executive team, 5 people, 7 people, whatever the number is. Maybe what you do is you say, we're going to expand that to the next level down, or a whole bunch of specific high potentials, for example, that might at some point move into those more senior roles. In a certain sense, what this does is it lets them into that private room where they can actually see and participate if you will. It allows them to interact with other people, not just their direct boss, if you will. And it allows them to form peer networks in that room where normally they might not be. I think that's an incredibly powerful tool to to actually do succession planning in practice, not just in terms of here's the succession plan, here's the various things we're going to do. So that's one part of the question. The other part of the question you asked, which I think I understand, is how do you know you're successful? Okay, so this you've got to reach really far back here and talk about, well, what's the culture of the organization? Is it a culture of coaching managers or command and control managers? Is it a culture of bringing people up, right, through active mentoring? Or is it a question of sort of hoarding information and putting gates around your people so they can't learn anything other than what's in your particular part of the pie? And I think the question of whether you're successful or not as a CEO, managing director, executive director, whatever the title is, board chair, is that if you have some of those people inside of the group, the second tier leadership group, not the executive team, and if they're participating and asking questions, and if they've got some degree of comfort, challenging certain assumptions or coming up with a different point of view, or are they meek and mild and they just don't open their mouth whatsoever, right? If they've got that kind of behavior in the leadership retreat, even for the people that are more introverted, okay, if they've got that comfort to be able to say, how about this? Or they've got the ability to build bridges to people that they don't, that you're probably doing things right. If on the other hand, they're deer in the headlights, gee, I'm special, I get to be here, but I better not open my mouth because I'm not supposed to be here. No, 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 you're supposed to be there, right? Now, if it's by design, some leadership retreats are just the executives, right? We've done some where it's like everybody in the same everyone in the organization is a little bit different dynamic there, right? But it boils down to the culture, it boils down to the psychological safety in the organization. It boils down to the actual mentorship that leaders do to their direct reports and to others, and the nature of the invite to the retreat itself. Interesting question.
Thank you for the answer. Okay, on my next question. Preparation. Okay. How should the leader or senior leaders prepare for a retreat? So best case scenario, they've hired professionals to organize the agenda, manage the facilitation, all those things. So what remains on the CEO's desk to prepare themselves?
Okay, so first of all, all that stuff that gets organized, they've hired this, that, whatever. Let's distinguish, first of all, between the people who are doing all the logistics and administration around the putting together the event and the people who are putting together the agenda and working with the CEO to put together the agenda. And the kind of preparation is there's two ways that a CEO can go. First of all, the CEO can say, you know something, let me find a facilitator that's got their retreat in a box. If you've got a retreat on the box, All we do is we plug you in. Here's the time. You show up and you go through your process, retreat in the box. And at the very end, everyone says, wow, that was good. It was inspiring, motivating, or gee, we sort of went through that process and worked hard, etc. And there's merit in that because for the leader, you have very little preparation to do. It takes very little time. Tick, we get the people in, they do their thing, out they go, you never see them again. Or maybe they'll try and sell you some subsequent things, but generally you don't see them again. The other way, which is actually what I love and what we do at the Brain Trust, is we say, okay, well, listen, this is a very critical meeting, and it has to be, the agenda has got to be very, very specific for the organization itself. It can't be this generic kind of thing because every organization's history is different. Every organization's future is different. The people are different. The strategies are different. The lived experiences in the marketplace with the people, with all the processes, all different. And therefore, how is it possible to have a productive retreat, no matter the goal of the retreat, unless it is highly specific and customized? If you want to move the needle, you have to make sure that you're pressing the right buttons. And so, in this particular case, CEO might give us a brief, essentially saying, hey, we've got this coming up in the future. We need some help with such and such. Whether it's, gee, we're going to do a strategic plan, or gee, we merged 2 years ago, and for whatever reason, the team's not gelling. Or, something, we're thinking of moving to another geography. We need to sort of get everyone up to speed. Or we're going to have some transaction in the future. We need to, whatever the particular overall sort of goal. And then what we would do is we would actually go and interview pretty much everybody around the table. What do you need to be successful given your particular role? What are the things that you think other people need in terms of either upskilling or conversations, etc.? Are there any elephants in the room? Has there been any recent training that you or your people have had that you think you need more of? Like, there's a whole bunch of questions and everything. What are the business issues? Um, um, what are the opportunities there? Once we've got that, then we can say, okay, amongst everybody, here are the clusters of ideas. And these clusters of ideas then become agenda items, right? And those agenda items can be dealt with in a training upskilling kind of way. They can be dealt with in small group work, small group activities. They can be interactive facilitations, all kinds of different modes of delivery, if you will, for that particular thing. We would then go, and this goes back to your question, we'd go back to CEO and say, okay, based on what you've said the issue is, or the overall remit of the session is, and this is what everyone needs, here is how we can square that circle. Here's our proposed agenda. And at that particular time, the CEO will say, yes, 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 yes. Always seems to be what it is. A little bit more of this, a little bit less of that. And at that particular point, off we go, and we sort of put together the whole content, whether the facilitation notes or the materials or the training slides or whatever it happens to be. And then we do another touch base with them as well. So this, in a certain sense, is the mechanics of what a CEO needs to be doing. On the other hand, there's some other things that we like to have a conversation with that I think is really important. So, for example, as a retreat facilitator, we've worked with a lot of other CEOs. And so we're happy to answer questions about what other CEOs are kind of thinking about, right? Or other things that they can do. Is there some ways that they can sort of open up more effectively? We put together this retreat opening remarks blueprint. Very, very cool way to say, hey, listen, if you're going to have your opening remarks, here is precisely minute by minute the kind of things that you might consider talking about. I can guarantee you every single CEO has got that in the back of their mind. But are all the bullets that we have in our little blueprint on their mind? No, they might have forgotten about something, right? So we can provide those kinds of resources to the CEO. Or for that matter, I remember one conversation, this is with a C-suite leader of a very, very large organization, global organization. We said, you know what do we think about a theme for the retreat? Not just a title, but a theme that we could sort of wire everything into. The stuff we're doing, the stuff they're doing by themselves, etc. They hadn't thought about that. right? So what we came up with collectively was something that resonated with people. It became sort of the hook in which all the learning of the retreat itself was hung up on, which then could be referenced all at once, rather than saying, "Oh, that February retreat in such and such." Well, maybe we can call it something that is more meaningful. What else? Gee,
You're doing great.
yeah, I know. I'm just sort of racking my brain here. Um, I think I think that the question of positioning any pre-work is also something that the leader has to get behind. We've always felt that having people show up, having done nothing beforehand, then magically being, I don't know, entertained is unfortunate because wouldn't it be amazing if we were able to hit the ground running in terms of embedding, say, certain key concepts? So in some retreats, for example, it's okay. Here's a bunch of leadership insights. Please, can you ask people to pre-read? In which case, the CEO will make that a request of everybody, and people will do it, and it's very easy. In other cases, it's here's a whole bunch of pre-work. We wouldn't mind doing a Zoom session with the team, just to sort of kick off some pre-work for them. And they could do that in Teams, etc. Maybe we have a second one, a little meeting, etc., or some mini coaching. And then when we actually get to the retreat itself, there's all kinds of things on the agenda. But part of it is to take all that pre-work that they did. So a great example of this is, say, in a strategic planning context. If there's strategic planning, it can't be done in a vacuum. There's got to be a whole bunch of pre-work before the actual retreat facilitates and gets consensus and alignment and everything. So, what is that pre-work, right? Very, very important. Same thing with respect to, you know, if there's any huge need for building better group dynamics and collaboration, just getting them to work on a particular project. So for example, AI, every organization we know has got something working on AI. Okay, but is it being done at the leadership level? Is there something we can do to get people to work on to deal with, say, that if as when it's new or mostly new for most leaders? Is there something we can do, for example, to get them working, say, more creatively or building critical thinking skills or something like that as a group? So these kinds of things, we would have these conversations with the CEO, they would get behind it. And so there's this expectation beforehand. And I think also just to answer the other side of it is, well, what happens afterwards? What kind of work is there for the leader at the very end? I have to tell you, the biggest opportunity that most leaders miss at the very end is actually reaching out to us as facilitators afterwards. And the reason why is that we have all these observations about their team, all these informal conversations where they're asking us questions or or we're answering whatever they're saying or part of discussions in small groups, not in the formal parts of the retreat, but afterwards or beforehand or over a meal or something. Um, we have some great insights. And gee, if we've done all these interviews beforehand, we've got a whole ton of insights for that as well. So I think that, the smarter clients of ours, certainly they want to take advantage of that kind of thing. And I think that it's a huge, huge, huge benefit. The work's already been done. Okay, the work's already been done. I think the other thing that the CEOs can do is they could take notes for follow-up. You know, if you're not supposed to open your mouth all the way through that retreat, okay, you can't be doing your email, okay? But everyone's taking notes based on what's happening, etc. You can take notes too with respect to how people are performing, if you will, during the retreat, right? Or any observations that you might have when it comes to, say, a one-on-one with a particular person, right? So you can actually do that as well. We ask CEOs beforehand again to do one other thing as well. Um, the fact that you're bringing people together, very often, people are working in different places, in different offices, different jurisdictions, different business units, et cetera, different levels, different functions, et cetera. So wouldn't it be nice, rather than everyone to sit with their friends, wouldn't it be nice instead if they sat next to people who were specifically curated for them to sit next to? Wouldn't it be nice if we're doing a bunch of different small group exercises that we can choose who's in the various different groups, right? If we've got one group looking at risk, there's a certain profile of person that looks at risk in a particular way. And if there's another group that's looking at opportunity, there's typically people who are different that are very much that. But what happens if we sort of mix them up in a very particular way? So there's a dynamic that is very frothy, right? And where people can learn to work together a little bit better. We don't know the dynamics of the individuals around the table the way the CEO does. So we ask for a little bit of help there as well, right? I think that the main thing is we want to remove cognitive load from everybody involved and make it easier and to minimize the amount of time they need to think about it and only interact with them where we're actually adding value or where their input beforehand or during can make a substantive difference to achieving the retreat's goals.
Spending time with everyone at the retreat. Okay. So senior leaders usually, ideally, they're making it a point to, get that face time, spend time with everyone there. We talk to clients about, having productive meetings. What should a one-on-one look like? What should a skip manager meeting look like? What should daily stand up like? What for these conversations happening at the retreat? Is it, enough? And is there merit and value to just having unstructured, the lighthearted chit chat? Or should the senior leaders, be more intentional to look and steer the conversation to gather certain information? Like, is there a right or wrong way to approach those conversations? On that note, we're going to pause right here, this part one on CEO role modeling at leadership retreats. We're going to come back with more Q&A for part two. And in the meantime, if anything we talked about so far resonates with you, if you want to have a conversation, we're happy to share resources, share ideas. You can reach us at www.randallcraig.net/30 or send us an email to requests@randallcraig.com. And we'll see you back for part two.